You're 6 years old and you don't need an alarm clock. Your body just knows. You pad down the hallway in your pajamas, park yourself 3 feet from the screen, and wait. When that television flickers on, the rest of the world disappears. This was appointment viewing, a 4-hour window on Saturday mornings when the networks broadcast everything a child wanted to see. Because the time slot was so restricted, the experience felt urgent. If you weren't there at 8 a.m., you missed the mystery, missed the battle, and the Monday morning school conversation. The experience created a durable sensory memory. The specific combination of high-sugar cereal, the feel of the carpet, and the opening chords of a theme song became encoded together. Decades later, the smell of Cocoa Puffs can transport you back to that exact physical state of childhood anticipation. Millions of kids were having this exact experience at the exact same time. This created a parasocial community, a generation defined by a specific set of shared stories and characters that still function as collective cultural shorthand today. This ritual didn't start with a creative vision, it started with a gap in the schedule. In the early days of broadcasting, Saturday morning was a television wasteland. Networks had no viable programming to sell to adult advertisers, leaving 4 hours of airtime completely empty. The void was filled by William Hanna and Joseph Barbara. They were former MGM animators who lost their jobs when theatrical cartoons collapsed in the 1950s. They realized they could dominate the Saturday morning dead zone by producing content cheaper and faster than anything Hollywood had ever seen. Their secret was a technique called limited animation. Instead of using 24 drawings per second, they used as few as 3 or 4, leaving characters still while only their mouths moved. They compensated for the lack of movement with versatile voice talent. 2 actors could perform a dozen distinct roles in a single afternoon session. This cheap animation was financed by a commercial symbiosis. Cereal companies and toy manufacturers didn't just buy ad time, they shaped the content. By the 1980s, the 22-minute episodes functioned as program-length commercials, introducing new toy lines directly to their target audience. This created a great irony. An ecosystem designed purely to sell sugar and plastic action figures produced the most enduring cultural vocabulary of a generation. In 1968, a mother named Peggy Charon looked at this unregulated commercial landscape and decided to organize a resistance. She founded Action for Children's Television to demand more educational content and fewer manipulative sales pitches targeting minors. Her advocacy led to the Children's Television Act of 1990. The law required the FCC to consider a station's educational record during license renewals and establish strict limits on the number of commercial minutes allowed during children's shows. But the 1996 Kid Vid rules contained a loophole. They mandated 3 hours of educational content, but applied much looser advertising restrictions to shows targeting teenagers. Networks quickly realized they could satisfy their legal obligations by airing cheap live-action teen dramas instead of expensive animation. Before the stricter rules took effect, networks exploited the vague language of the law. They classified the Jetsons as educational because it taught kids about life in the future. They argued Joe Joe satisfied the mandate because it promoted civic virtues. Government regulation was well-intentioned, but it made Saturday morning cartoons legally and financially impossible for broadcast networks to sustain. The business model that built the era simply ceased to exist. The law wasn't the only factor. While the networks were navigating new regulations, a massive technological shift was stealing the audience's attention. 16-bit home video game consoles provided a highly engaging, interactive alternative to passive television. For many children, the Saturday morning time slot was now being used for Super Mario or Sonic the Hedgehog instead of broadcast cartoons. Simultaneously, 24-hour cable networks like Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network arrived. They used the same historic cartoon libraries to offer animation all day, every day. The broadcast network's 4-hour weekend window was no longer a rare destination, it was obsolete. The combination of regulatory hurdles, home video games, and infinite cable access meant the networks no longer needed a dedicated Saturday morning slot. By 2014, the final broadcast block was gone. But lately, something unexpected is happening. Generation Z, the demographic that never experienced the broadcast ritual, is driving a massive revival of this aesthetic. This is nostalgia. Recommendation algorithms on YouTube and TikTok are introducing these shows to viewers born long after they aired, creating deep emotional connections to a past they never lived. The demand is translating into real business. In March 2026, the free streaming service Tubi added over 100 legacy titles from the Cartoon Network and Hanna-Barbera vault, creating one of the largest collections of classic animation available. At the same time, continuation shows like X-Men '97 have seen millions of views and massive social media engagement. There is a clear economic driver here. Licensing a library of classic animation is significantly cheaper for streamers than producing new original series, and it delivers high viewer retention as parents share these shows with their own children. Modern streaming platforms have inadvertently recreated the original model, free, ad-supported cartoons. The very system that 1990s regulation destroyed has found a new home online. This leads to a final question: even if we have access to every show ever made, can we ever actually recreate the Saturday morning experience? Modern streaming often leads to choice anxiety, the frustration of scrolling through an infinite menu without ever picking a show. The 1990s model provided a comforting, restricted curation. You didn't have to choose, you just had to be there. We can recover the shows, but we cannot reproduce the scarcity, the specific magic of knowing that everyone was watching the same thing at the exact same time is structurally impossible in an on-demand world. In the end, what we really mourn isn't the cartoons themselves. We miss a time when the world was quiet and disconnected enough to let a 4-hour shared imagination exist.